Welcome to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. My name is Luis Rosa, and I'm your host. I hope you're all happy, healthy, and safe. Let's talk about credit scores, particularly how the right mix of credit can help you. A lot of the times we focus on not having all of our eggs in one basket. So if you think of investments, any financial planner will tell you that you need to have a diversified portfolio with different amounts of money invested in different asset classes like stocks, bonds, large company stocks, small company stocks, international, global, et cetera, right? Often overlooked is how you should manage your debt or your credit. We tend to diversify our investments. Like I mentioned, we also tend to diversify our streams of income. For example, in retirement, some people don't want to only rely on Social Security, so they make sure that they save enough money in their 401k so that they can draw from them later. Maybe they have a pension, maybe they have rental income, maybe they have part-time job, et cetera. So often overlooked is your credit mix. It's actually something that is very important in determining your overall credit score. There is a formula that is used for the most part to arrive at what your credit score would be. And I'm going to give you those percentages. So your FICO score is composed of 35% your payment history, 30% amounts owed, 10% new credit, 15% is the length of credit, and then 10% is the credit mix. And the credit mix is what I wanted to focus on in today's topic because it's one of the smallest percentage in terms of the overall FICO score. And sometimes it could be easily overlooked. And remember, sometimes life is a game of inches. So having a good credit mix might just give you the boost enough that you need to get the FICO score up. So let's talk about the different types of credit and how you can have different mix in your score to help you. So one of the things that a lot of people need to know is that there are generally two types of credit. One is called revolving, one is called installment. So if you've ever looked at your credit report, you might notice how they're broken up into different sections, or it might show like this is the amount of revolving credit you have, this is the amount of installment credit. So I wanted to just take you a little bit deeper into that so you know exactly what that means. So installment credit, very simply stated, is something that has a fixed end date with a series of payments due every single month. Typically, these are your mortgages, student loans, car loans, and personal loans. So you know it's installment because you know when it ends. Basically, put it that way. If you have a fixed payment and you know when it ends, it's going to be an installment because it has a fixed end date and a fixed series of payments due every month. So that's installment credit. Very simple. A lot of us already have that kind of stuff. Revolving credit is a little different. It doesn't have a specific end date or a set balance. Does that sound familiar? Most likely, you may have a credit card. Credit card will fall under revolving credit. So does a line of credit if you have either a personal line of credit or a business line of credit that you personally guaranteed. What else? If you own a home and you have a home equity line of credit, that will also fall under revolving credit. Now, a home equity loan will fall under installment because a home equity loan will be fixed with a series of payments and a designated end date. But a home equity line of credit kind of acts similar to a credit card where you have a limit, but not necessarily a balance because it's based on how much you use. So instead of spacing out the balance equally over a certain length of time, a minimum payment is due each month. You have the option of sending more than the minimum payment, but you're not required to. Obviously, you are encouraged to because otherwise you end up paying more interest and it might take longer to pay off. And then it can impact your credit in a different manner because if you recall at the beginning, 30% of your FICO score is derived from your amounts owed and also something called credit utilization ratio, which looks at how much you owe as a percentage of the amount of credit that you have available. So you want to make sure that you have a good mix of credit, but you also don't want to just necessarily just run out there and get credit just for the sake of boosting your score and put yourself into debt. So it's not something that I recommend, but it's something just to keep in mind, right? So once you've already determined, you know what installment credit is, you know what revolving credit is, you then want to pursue a mix of these as you go through your journey through building credit. So, for example, let's look at some of the most common types of revolving credits, which are credit cards. And there's two subcategories within that. One is a bank card, and the other one is a retail card. Now, a bank card is issued by a bank, right? It has that name, issued by a bank. So these are your major credit cards that you hear out there. Now, you also have retail cards, which are usually offered by either online stores or your traditional brick and mortar store. So these are like your retail stores that you will go clothes shopping. It could be a store that fixes tires, for example. They might issue you a card. Now, a lot of these cards are sometimes easier to obtain, but they also typically tend to have higher interest rates and different types of fees. So you want to be familiar with all the details before using any retail credit card. There are some benefits sometimes to using a retail credit card, especially if you are a frequent user of that particular brand. It might make sense for you to get a retail card. But you also want to have one of the major bank cards as well. Now, just because you get credit, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to carry a balance. This is something that I often hear people think that they need to carry a balance in order to establish credit or improve their credit. And that is not necessarily true. You can have a credit card that you charge certain things every month and then immediately pay it off before the grace period. And in essence, not pay any interest on it. But the activity is, in fact, reported to the credit bureaus. So you end up still getting the benefit of having used that card. And because you're not carrying a balance, you fall under the credit utilization ratio category. And it's going to be very low because when the FICO score is calculated, they're going to say, wow, this person has a really low, maybe 0%, 2%, whatever it is, depending on when it is that they pull it, of the credit that is in fact available. And that really helps you. So a great way for you to build credit or improve your credit is at some point, if you have credit card debt now, of course, there are methods that you can use to get rid of that. And look back on some of my prior episodes, I talk about the debt snowball method and avalanche method as ways to save money and interest and pay your debt faster. But if you get to that point where you can just have credit, or even if you've never had credit before, it's a great starting point to get one of these cards and then start using them, paying them off in full, and get the benefit of using the card without having to carry a balance and then paying interest. So something to keep in mind. Just charge off whatever you can pay off every month. So typically something that you would have purchased anyway, like with your debit card, use the credit card instead, especially if you're going to like gas stations and other places, for security reasons, you're actually better off using a credit card than you are a debit card. Because first of all, debit card transactions are not being reported to your credit. And second of all, if your credit card is stolen, like the information, you hear that very often at either ATMs or gas stations. Some people put a device that then would duplicate your card. If they do that and they use your debit card, then the money's out of your bank. If they use a credit card, you have more protections in that regard. A lot of the credit card companies are more likely to work with you, put the money back into the account, et cetera. So just to protect yourself, it's better to use a credit card than a debit, and also for purposes of credit reporting as well. Now, let's talk about the credit mix a little bit more. What isn't part of a credit mix? So I wanted to tell you a little bit about that. Two of the most common types of loans that don't count to our credit mix are payday loans and title loans. These are two kinds of loans that I tell people to, really refrain from using. I've seen horror stories about these things, that interest rates are super high. And the terrible thing about this is when you do a payday loan or a title loan, they are not being reported to the credit bureau. So even if you pay back on time, it really has no upside. It cannot help your credit whatsoever. Now, the flip side to that is that if you default on one of these payday loans or title loans, the opposite could really happen. They can really hurt your credit because typically they would then be reported and sold to some sort of collection agency. So there's really no upside to it. So if you can avoid using a payday loan, title loan, you don't want that to be part of your credit mix whatsoever because there really isn't any help. And in fact, it could hurt your credit score instead. Now, does a lack of credit mix really hurt your score? You know, if you only have one type of credit in your profile, does that make a huge impact? Not necessarily. I mean, the credit mix is only 10% of the overall formula. So you're better off having a payment history that's stellar, right? Because that's 35% of the formula, or a very low amount owed in relation to what's available to you, because 30% of the formula is the amount owed. And the length of your credit history is also very important because it shows the longer you've had a credit card open for and you've been using it, the better it reflects on your credit score because it shows creditors or potential creditors that you can manage credit properly and wisely because you've been doing it for a long time, which is why when you open credit cards that are new, if you open several of them, new credit is about 10% of your score. So a lot of the times you might notice when you have a new account, whether it's a new credit card, maybe you just got a car loan, that your credit score takes a little bit of a dip. And that's typically because it falls under that 10% category. It's new credit. So if you don't have a strong enough credit score to begin with, and then you go out and get one or two cards or a new car loan, you might see that dip until that credit has been reported for a while. So again, if you don't have a diverse enough credit mix in your credit portfolio, if you would, don't go out there necessarily and get new credit and get yourself into debt just to have a mix. But consider going forward, as you move on through your credit journey, if you are going to use credit anyway, then just keep in mind that 10% of the overall credit mix takes into account as part of the overall FICO score. So you do want to have a diverse. Most of us already that graduated college already have installment because we have student loans, right? And then eventually you get a car loan, that's another installment. So if that's you, then I would recommend go ahead and get a credit card as well. And then use the credit card for things that you were going to use and pay for anyway. So don't get yourself into debt, but say groceries, your cell phone bill, your gas bill, things like that you were going to pay for anyway, put those on the credit card, pay the credit card off every single month. Now, the reason I say that is because the credit card companies are still going to report this to the credit bureaus, and they're making money anyway. So interest on your balance is only one way that credit cards can make money. You can have zero balance and pay zero interest, or pay your credit card before the grace period, and the credit card company is still going to make money because every time you swipe, they charge the vendor where you used your credit card. Which is why, I don't know if you've noticed, sometimes you might go to a restaurant or a specific store and they mention how they don't accept a type of credit card. Typically, the reason for that is because that particular store might be being charged what they consider too much of a fee by a particular credit card company. So you might see a place that says, hey, no, sorry, we only take this type and this type. That's really the only reason, because they have the capability. It's just they don't like the prices. So if you go to a restaurant and you spend $100, that particular restaurant might only be getting $97, for example, if the credit card company is charging them 3%. So that's something to consider. Credit card companies are making money every time you swipe, even if you don't carry a balance. They make money on overdraft fees. They make money on cash advance fees. They make money on foreign transactions. I mean, there's a whole bunch of ways that they can make money. Making interest on your balance is just icing on the cake, gravy, as they say. So it's a necessary evil. You have to play the game. But if you play it right, you can do it without getting yourself into debt while at the same time boosting your credit score. And you need a strong credit score because as we go through life, most major purchases, you're likely not going to have enough money to buy them outright. Or if you do, it may not make sense to buy them outright. If you have a good credit score and you can get a much lower interest, it might make sense to finance because you have to consider what you would do with the money instead of putting it all down on something, right? So a car being the case, if you have great credit score and you get a really low interest rate on a car, even if you have the money to buy a cash, it might make sense for you to finance it and then use the money you would have to purchase a car and invest it or something else, right? So keep those things in mind. And I hope that you found this useful. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, luis@onmywaytowealth.com. Check out the show notes where I have a link to LatinXcellence. That's LatinXmovement.com. It's a movement I'm working on to help close the wealth gap in the Latinx community, Latinos, Latinas. And thank you. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, please send me an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. The information provided here is for information and education purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of myself, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by my firm or myself about other parties' information or accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with a financial advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation. Thank you.